Komi wakes up from the sound of her alarm, but resets it and tries to go back to bed. Immediately, however, her phone goes off and she falls out of bed and hits her head on the floor trying to get it. When she's able to check it, she checks outside of her window and smiles. The person who sent the message was from Najimi, who asks for the notebook they asked Komi to prepare. Komi then prepares herself for school, and before she leaves, her mother gives her a scarf and sees her off. Arriving at school, Najimi touches Komi with their cold hands, which irks her. Tadano then arrives and greets Komi, which shocks her, but she regains her composure and bows in return. As Tadano puts away his outside shoes and puts on his school shoes, Komi catches him off by touching him with her cold hands. The act perplexes Tadano, but pleases Komi, and the two walk to class together. Najima then gives an elaboration on Itan Private High School's background, and when they complete it, Najima asks for the notebook they asked Komi for. Reaching into her school bag, Komi gets the notebook and Najima takes it so they can use the notebook for the Komi's Book of Friends. Its purpose is like a game where Komi asks people who she befriended to write down their names in it. The first person she signals to sign it is Tadano. He does, and the group manages to get 13 more signatures, which has Najima despondent over the fact that Komi's not even close to her 100 friend goal. Given the fact that she's been at this for the past 6 months, this response has Komi trembling. Katai Makoto, a new student at Itan High, walks down the hallway while giving an inner monologue about himself, and as he goes on his merry way, he's stared at by his student peers. This is because of his menacing delinquent appearance. However, he considers himself to be a normal high school student. To prepare himself for school, he worked out and dyed his hair blonde, all to avoid looking like a dropout. Reaching his classroom, Katai musters the courage to enter it, but when he does, he hurts his foot by the door, making him have an angry look on his face. Circling around the room, he realizes that he forgets to ask where his desk is, so he decides to wait in the back room, and his face gives off a leering look. At that moment, Najimi enters the classroom and they recognize Katai, which elates the classroom, who thinks of them as their savior. However, Katai grapple holds Najimi, and takes them out of the classroom as he doesn't want them to disclose his past to the classroom. Once Katai re-enters the classroom, he smiles and the classroom believes that he disposed of Najimi, who in fact, was in the restroom. Hoping that someone would talk with him, Katai sees that his classmates circle around Komi, which he wonders why. Wanting to change, Katai approaches the group and is blocked off by the classroom delinquents. He bumps into them and says desk. What he meant to say was good day. Where's my desk?
Die. Death.
Die. Death.
It was all because Katai had something caught in his throat that he wasn't able to properly speak, and had hoped they understood him, which they didn't. After the delinquents take their seats, Katai walks forward and spots Komi, who makes him scared due to the pressure of her presence. Too anxious to stand, he takes the seat in front of Komi and takes a deep breath, which irks Komi. Noting that Komi is the only person to make direct eye contact with him, Katai recalls the book specializing in talking that he's been reading and believes that Komi wants to communicate with him. Katai then looks at Komi, who looks back at him, and as both of them are too scared to start the conversation, they simply sit and tremble. Tadano then chimes in and starts to talk with Katai, who gives a deep voice, which internally embarrasses him. Despite Katai being so self-conscious with himself, Tadano offers to show him around the school and Katai accepts the offer. Afterward, Tadano shows Katai around the school as he said, and Katai believes that Komi is a master of communication from the stares she gave him earlier that day. After school, Najimi does a snowman pose for both Komi and Tadano, but Tadano has no clue as to why they were doing it. Tadano then mentions that he thought Najimi hated winter, and they claim they hate the cold, but enjoy the events that occur in the wintertime, and names them all off. They stop midway when they realize that there are also the term finals they all have to do, and then decided they should study at Nakanaka's place. At Nakanaka's place, Tadano, Komi, Naima, and also now Ren, who gets into a quiet quarrel with Nakanaka. Inside Nakanaka's room, Naimi immediately leaps into Nakanaka's bed and falls asleep. Another brief quiet quarrel between Ren and Nakanaka occurs when the two want Komi to sit next to them.
Now the competition has begun to see who Komi likes more.
Eventually, Nakanaka offers to play a video game to gain favor with Komi, which Ren shoots down the idea as too boyish. Ren then asks who she likes while noting she likes her. However, Komi gives no response and Tadano mentions they're supposed to be studying. They then continue to do so, and Ren mentions how Nakanaka's room is like an otaku boy with its black interior and anime posters. The comment hurts Nakanaka and asks Ren's opinion on a typical girl's room. Ren then lists off an assortment of things that every girl's room should have, and Nakanaka comments on how basic it is, which infuriates Ren immensely. The two then give disparaging comments to each other, all while jotting down notes. Tadano then tries to mediate between the two, but is shot down and Komi is then asked who the better friend is. Komi then responds that they're both important to her. The response moves them, however, they still demand an answer. As a way to settle their conundrum, Nakanaka suggests they settle it with a video game and Komi along with Najimi play as well. In the end, Najimi wins, much to Nakanaka's and Ren's dismay. The two try and settle the score on their test exams, however, their scores are even on that. On the day of the term finals, Komi drops her pencil on the ground and her spare breaks. Due to her being unable to pick up her spare as she has to communicate that she has to do it. Tadano notices this and drops his stencil pen, and asks the teacher to pick it up for him. The teacher does and picks up Komi's as well. It's then that Tadano forgot his eraser and Komi breaks her own and drops it on the ground. Taking this opportunity, Tadano asks the teacher to pick it up for him and she does. After this, both Komi and Tadano were unable to focus on their test. Komi prepares herself for school and the moment she opens the door to go outside, she's hit the realization that a typhoon has hit her area. Back inside her house, Komi dries herself off and her mother informs her that her teacher called them and she should stay home for the remainder of the storm. Hearing this excites Komi, but truthfully it felt ambivalent to her. Watching the rain from her living room, Komi draws a cat on the glass door, but gets spooked by a flash of lightning, which kills the power in her house. Terrified by this experience, Komi rests on her mother's lap, until her mother says she'll examine the circuit breaker with her brother Shaosuke and leaves her. At that moment, she's spooked by her phone ringing and it's Tadano who is calling to check up on her. He learned that her part of the area had a blackout and Komi reassures Tadano that she was fine. As Komi continues to talk with Tadano, her mother bashfully watches from the other room. Ren was melancholic. That day, the storm that hit had passed and school was back in session that afternoon. The reason for her mood wasn't because that school was back in session, but that she couldn't see Komi's panties, which Tadano picks up and it irks him.
How can I possibly get a glimpse at Komi's underwear?
What is she talking about?
Ruminating on what kind of panties Komi wears and her yearning desire to see them, Ren has an epiphany and innocently asks Komi to play in the outside puddles with her. Surprisingly, Komi accepts the proposal much to the shock of Tadano. Outside, with Tadano, Agari, Najima, and Komi, Ren thinks about how the puddles from the rain will reflect the color of Komi's panties to her. This is briefly disturbed by Najimi running through the puddles and a strong gale hits them. Hoping this wind would reveal Komi's panties, it only reveals Agari's, hence Ren trips and falls onto the ground with her phone and hopes to get a snapshot of Komi's panties. However, mud covers the shot, leaving her frustrated, and Najimi then mentions that there's a rainbow. Ren, however, is far too furious to care. Until she sees Komi gazing at it and is left purified. After school, in their classroom, Kiarai, Shinobino, Sonoda discuss all the girls in their class whom would they personally date. Tadano was also there, but not a part of the conversation. Kiarai first chose Najimi and in the fantasy, they go to an amusement park and after it, they eat some ice cream. His next choice was Agari who waits for her in a shopping district and when she arrives, she apologizes for her tardiness. He downplays it claiming he just arrived there himself and compliments her dress, which she claims was worn with him in mind.
I just thought that you'd be fine with it.
Next up is Sonoda who takes a pouty Ren out to a fancy restaurant, and he apologizes for the bad food, but Ren still blames him for his bad tastes. So, Sonoda then pulls out a small navy box and presents it to Ren who opens it up and is surprised to see inside a couple of earrings. Although she acts as if she dislikes them, Ren still puts them on while blushing and says they should leave. Hearing this bit makes Tadano think they don't know Ren's true nature. The next person Sonoda chooses is Amaharu and he plays video games at her house, while she reads. Seeing that Sonoda is having trouble in the game, Amaharu helps him in it and they would later play the game together. Finally is Shinobino and his first choice is Inaka. In his monologue, he lives in the countryside as a farm help and is in a relationship with his next door neighbor Inaka who just farms some fresh vegetables. Shinobino tries one of them and enjoys it. For this next choice, Yadano and he exits a convenience store. Yadano is cold, but races him home and wins. The group's last choice is Komi, however, they fail to fantasize about a perfect scenario for them to elaborate. On the other hand, Tadano thinks of Komi and him as a husband and wife who just finished dinner and play rock paper scissors to choose who does the dishes. It's Tadano who wins and does it. However, amid washing the dishes, Komi starts to help him and gets close to him, causing Tadano to have a panic attack in real life.
What am I thinking?
Komi watches a new program about cat cafes and tells both Tadano and Najimi about it. She invites Najimi, but they're allergic to them and so she asks Tadano and he declines too, but suggests that she invite one mine instead. The person in question then shows up and immediately answers yes. After school, Komi, One Mine, and the newly joined Otori all play with the cats at the Nico Cafe Gâteau, except Komi as the cats are afraid of her. As it so happens, Otori was very popular with the cats, which made Komi super envious. So, One Mine suggests that Komi try petting the sleeping cat, but Komi is too afraid to approach it. The alpha cat of the cafe, Chocolat, goes on an inner monologue about the people that visit the cafe until she's interrupted by another cat that warns her of Komi. Initially Chocolat downplays the warning, but becomes shocked when Komi looks at her. After Chocolat observes her for a while, she decides to leap onto Komi's lap. One Mine takes a picture of Komi holding Chocolat and sends a picture to Tadano, who regrets not going as he wanted Komi to practice inviting other people to have fun with her.
I should have gone.
One day after school, Ren sheepishly tells Komi that she loves her, leaving her in complete shock. As it turns out, it was just a two-person game where one person says I love you to another, and if the other person reacts with a smile or blushes, the original person wins. In Ren's game, however, she loses as Komi showed neither reaction, but it's all fine since Ren just wanted to confess her love to Komi. It was Komi's turn now and Ren eagerly awaits for Komi to say, I love you to her. Just then, Najimi enters the scene and plays along by saying the phrase to Komi and she does a spit take, which Naimi claims they won. Denying the fact, Tadano is asked to judge and he rules in favor of Komi. This escalates into both Najimi and Ren trying to win against Komi, so Tadano is roped into it, but is too flustered to partake in it. He's, however, coerced into doing it by Najimi as they claim it's just a game, but because he himself blushed he loses. Tadano then contemplates his loss and Komi then leaves to seemingly go to the bathroom, but in truth, she was overwhelmed with emotions. Komi didn't want Tadano to confess his love to her and yet she did in the same breath. During one of her classes, Komi is asked by the teacher to read something aloud, but another student reads it for her. Later, during their break period, Najimi talks about the upcoming winter break, and Amaharu eavesdrops on it. Tadano asks Amaharu about what she wants, and she defensively claims that Tadano has the uncanny ability to read minds. Yet, he failed to read hers. However, he manages to read her mind, leaving her mortified and looking flush. Afterward, Amaharu opens up to Tadano during gym, asking him how Komi thinks. Claiming that she's Komi's sworn ally, she must know what she thinks so she can protect her. Tadano claims that he doesn't know much about how Komi thinks despite his astute ability to read people. As he says this, Ren appears and demands that she learn how to read Komi too. So, Tadano suggests they do some observation exercises. First, they watch Komi trying to pick up some volleyballs, but both times another student does it for her. Tadano then asks what Komi was thinking from the two situations, but Ren and Amaharu's responses were wrong and too self-reflectant. Tadano's correct answer was that Komi felt bad they were doing it for her and felt guilty. Secondly, they watch Komi sit in class while everyone around there talks amongst each other, and soon she spots Najimi talking with a group of people around their desk. That scene is another example, and Ren's response is again off the mark, while Amaharu's is closer to the correct answer. In truth, Komi was self-conscious about whether or not they were talking about her or not. Najima then spots a rainbow outside, and they and the people around their desk rush over to the window. Ren gives another wrong self-centered response for their following observation, and Amaharu provides an answer that besmirches Ren's. Unbeknownst to the two, Inaka was also watching and gave her own internal opinion, but it was also wrong. Komi wanted to join them, but didn't have the courage to. During their home EC class, Komi helps Najimi clean some vegetables.
Komi, can you rinse these veggies, please?
And once again, Amaharu and Ren give incorrect responses to their observations of Komi. This continues until Komi approaches the group and asks them about what they were doing watching her. Flabbergasted, both Ren and Amaharu try and give an excuse for their actions, but Komi asks to be able to join in. Hence, Tadano suggests they go to the cafe, and both Ren and Amaharu argue about who pays for what Komi buys. However, Komi wants them to pay for herself and wants the two to stop fighting. Shinobino, Chiari, and Sonoda all gather again in their classroom to finally discuss their respective fantasy of Komi. They talk about the girls they'd like to date in class while Tadano listens. Sonoda goes first, and his fantasy is about having a picnic with One Mine, which for the most part, is quiet yet moving. Next up is Shinobino, who returns home from work and Otori greets him. When Shinobino claims he made a fatal mistake at work, Otori consoles him. Finally, Chiari's features as an important political figure during the Bakumatsu period, with Shinobino as his spy and Komi as his wife/protector against Sonoda of the Shinsengumi.
I will eliminate all of you. I'll have you leave a few of your heads here.
They were going to continue discussing the matters until Komi arrived and sat down next to Tadano, and thus, the boys adjourned their meeting as no girls must be present during these talks. Katai introduces himself in his inner monologue and says his hobby is sewing patchwork. Happy about making a new friend who he considers a master of communication, Katai plans on asking Tadano to join him for lunch, but due to his anxiety, he cannot communicate this properly. Leaving the scene embarrassed and ashamed, Katai is soon followed by Tadano, and the two enjoy lunch together. As an elated Katai relishes this moment and thinks about how proud his mentor Komi must feel about him. Komi watches them from afar as she's worried for Tadano. On the other hand, Katai realizes that having lunch together wasn't the goal, but instead, getting closer with whom you're enjoying your lunch, and internally thanks Komi for her consideration. Tadano compliments Katai's lunch, and Katai asks Tadano what his hobbies are, which Tadano nervously answers. Katai believed the conversation without a hitch and looked at Komi for approval, but interpreted her intensive stare as disapproval. Therefore, Katai hoped to lighten the mood by making a friendly gesture by feeding Tadano a meatball from his lunch. This act makes Tadano cringe, but he still goes along, yet Komi gives an even more intense stare at them. Pondering what more he can do, Katai takes Komi's trembling as a message of sort and then sits next to Tadano and grasps his arm, following something he read in a book about hostesses. In Komi's vision, she thought that Katai was shaking down Tadano for money for eating his lunch.
You just ate my lunch, didn't ya?
Extortion.
Pay up, that'll be 20,000 yen.
Despite his neurotic nature, Tadano consoles Katai and claims that he can be himself when around him. Hearing Komi's tummy grumble, Tadano spots Komi and invites her to join them for lunch. Reluctantly, she agrees, and Tadano introduces them to each other as they're both far too nervous about introducing themselves. Before Tadano could inform them of their commonality, Najima stops them and suggests that he not reveal it as it's funnier this way, and joins them for lunch. Hearing a sweet potato salesperson outside, Komi gets some money from her father to purchase some. Outside, Komi receives the salesperson's attention, but due to her anxiety, she turns him away. After the salesperson again, Komi buys 5 sweet potatoes for herself. In his home, Tadano contemplates something that has been bothering him since the school culture fest and realizes that it was because everyone saw him as a girl. Lamenting his problem, he then starts to think about his dance with Komi and tries to resettle his emotions by going outside. Outside, Tadano goes for a bike ride and runs into Komi. He offers to walk her home, but Komi refuses. Tadano then thinks about inviting her to hang out with him during the winter break, but fails to do so by leaving early. Before Tadano leaves, Komi stops him and gives him a sweet potato, and Tadano asks Komi to do something together with him during winter break. Komi agrees to this, and Tadano leaves the scene. Sitting alone in her room, Komi looks at her calendar and sees that Christmas is coming. She then gets a phone call from Najimi, who tells her that a Christmas present exchange party will be held at her house with a budget of 2,000 yen.
Hello, Komi! We're having a Christmas party at your place on the 24th, so get a gift under 2,000 yen for the gift exchange. Goodbye!
After Najimi hangs up, Komi looks at her phone and becomes shocked to see that it's Christmas Eve. While hastily trying to get clothes on for outside, Komi realizes that she cannot choose a suitable present and other problems. Her younger brother Xiaosuk then walks by her room and is forced to accompany her on her shopping trip, which greatly annoys him. Xiaosuk offers her a bag of rice crackers, but Komi rejects it, so he tries to leave. However, Komi stops him and negotiates with him to stay. She then shows Xiaosuk a bunch of possible presents, including candles, a vase, and a dancing Santa doll. All of these things were rejected by Xiaosuk, who boldly tries to leave again. Later, Xiaosuk suggests a lovely pink sweater, and Komi chooses it, but when she asks him to buy it, he abruptly tries to leave. Late that afternoon, Najimi, accompanied by some of their classmates, arrived at Komi's house and said happy birthday to her. They get no response from Komi, prompting the group to think that Tadano was wrong telling them her birthday was tomorrow. Their goal was to have a surprise early birthday party for Komi. Komi then wrote on her notepad that it was tomorrow and thanks to them all. Relieved to hear that, Naimi gives Komi their present to her, and everyone else aside from Tadano enters her house. Tadano talks a bit with Komi and suggests she send a group thank you email to everyone afterward, and Komi agrees. Inside Komi's home, the guests all scoped out the living area and contemplated where they'll sit, while most of them considered what place would be best to sit next to Komi. Komi's mother then appears and asks to help pass out snacks. She agrees and is joined by Tadano and Naimi. The Komi enthusiastic students then play rock paper scissors to decide who Komi will sit next to, and Ren wins, only for Komi to sit next to Tadano. Afterward, Ren suggests they play the king game, and she rigs it so that she's the king. Although excited to be king, Ren struggles to think of what she'd ask Komi to do for her and decides to ask for her email, but is too flustered to ask it coherently. Najimi is next and wants Komi and them to dress up like Santa, which they have the costumes for already. This act was the highlight of the party. It was Tadano's turn next, and he asked that he receive a neck massage from the person who is number 7, which was the lowlight of the party. Otori is next, but she's unable to choose a command for 10 minutes. Yadano is the next king, and Kiarai, who is part of her fan club, wonders how she'll lose this time. Giving her command, Yadano commands that number 1 to 13 say a loss to her. Agari was the next king and asked that number 2 treat her like a dog. Amaharu is the next king and believes she'd get Ren to do it. She commands that number 6 turn around 3 times and bark like a dog. However, Ren's number was number 9, and the real number 6 was Tadano. Barging herself into the game, Komi's mother wins the game and commands that number 9 and number 4 kiss, which are Tadano and Shinobino. Tadano compromises with Shinobino by kissing his cheek, causing him to blush, which irks Tadano.
Wait a minute, why are you blushing?
Finally, it's Komi's turn as king, and she commands that everyone keep being her friend, and they all happily agree. This was recognized as the most touching moment of the day. Later in her room, Komi agonized over her silly command. Earlier that day, Tadano reflects on asking Komi to hang out with him during their winter break. He then recalls that Komi's birthday is soon and realizes that it's the next day, setting forth the events that lead to Komi's surprise birthday party at her house. Afterward, Tadano meets Najimi, accompanied by everyone except Ren, who attended the party to buy a present at the mall. However, Tadano spots Ren looking at lipstick, and Najimi hugs her in a sense they caught her. Najimi then sets the game's rules, the best present for Komi, where the rules are whoever buys the best present for Komi that she likes that's under 5,000 yen wins. They all show what they bought for Komi, and Ren goes first, revealing that she's the present. Sequentially, Omaharu bought Komi a gift card, One Mind bought Komi umeboshi, Yadano bought Komi protein powder, Najimi bought Komi 2 kilograms of ice cream, and Agari bought Komi a How to Train Your Dog set. Furthermore, Otori bought Komi an oil timer, Kishi, Shinobino, Sonata, and Akako didn't know what to get for Komi, and Najimi bought Komi a dancing Santa doll. Lastly, Tadano purchased a large black cat doll for Komi and suggested that they market it as something they decided to all buy together due to its price. They all agree and go to Komi's place to have the party. At the end of the night, aside from Tadano, the partygoers are morose over the lackluster feeling they got from Komi about the party. However, this changes when they receive an email from Komi thanking them all for the wonderful time they had together, which lifts their spirits. Awakening in her room, Komi sees that it snowed outside and then spots Tadano and Najimi Osana down in her yard. After quickly getting dressed, Komi meets with the two outside and sees that Najimi is trying to wake Tadano up from his sleep. It turns out that Najimi was up since 3 a.m., too stimulated to go to sleep because of the snow. So they visited and bothered Tadano at 5 a.m., leading up to 6 a.m. at Komi's home. When Tadano makes a small snowman on a fence, this inspires Najimi to suggest that they all create a giant snowman together. Once the body was complete, Najimi listed off the items they'll need to finish it. Komi understands, but before she can help fetch them is left terrified by a realistic hand made of snow that Najimi created. When they finish the snowman, Komi's mum invites them in for some warm soup. Komi stays outside, builds her own tiny snowman, and places it by Tadano's. Both Najimi and Tadano then return with some warm soup for Komi and to talk.
Good, right? Hey, Komi! I brought a mug of soup for you!
Najimi proposes a snowball fight, attracting a large crowd. Two teams are formed, the high school team consisting of Tadano, Najimi, Agari, Ren, and Yadano versus the elementary team, Shiota, Mishizato, Saiko, Oki, and Komi. Although the elementary kids are fired up, their mood is ruined by Komi's reticence. The snowball fight begins, and Oki is the first elementary student to go down. Shiota asks Komi to throw a snowball, but she's too scared to do it, and then Saiko is the next one taken out. In his observation, Shiota gauges Najimi, Yadano, and Ren as capable fighters, but rates Tadano and Agari as average. Mishizato is then taken out, and after a dramatic moment between them, Shiota, in a fiery rage, takes out Tadano and Agari. However, immediately after this, Shiota is taken out, and all that's left is Komi, who walks over to the other side where all that was left was Ren, who earlier took out Yadano and Najimi because they'd hit Komi with a snowball. In the end, Komi hits Ren with a snowball and wins the match for her team. The Komi family visit Yuiko in her home, and after they greet her, Ryoko appears and greets them. Putting away her shoes, Komi spots Akira, and after a brief chase around the house between them, they sit in one of the sitting rooms to play some Hanafuda. Komi accepts, and Akira weeps with joy. It's decided that they'll play koi koi, and as Akira explains the rules to Komi, Yuiko then appears in the room and decides to play against Akira, wagering her New Year's money. Confidently, Akira accepts. However, she loses 3,400 yen of her New Year's money. While Akira is distraught by her loss, Yuiko asks if Komi would like to play in wagers. If she manages to get a single point against her, she'll void Akira's loss. In the end, Komi manages to beat her grandmother in the game, which elates Akira.
Shoko, you formed Goko. So I lose.
Dressed in kimonos provided by their grandmother, Komi and Akira follow their grandmother Yuiko to the temple, and there they pray. Yuiko asks if Komi's wish last year came true, and she confirms it. Pleased to hear that, Yuiko asks that Komi gives thanks for that. Once they're finished, they visit the head priest, who needs help filling in a vacant shrine maiden position. Yuiko volunteers Komi for the job, and after being dressed in the shrine maiden outfit, she's introduced to the other shrine maiden, who happens to be Inaka. Flustered that she'd be ostracized as a country bumpkin because of Komi, she plays it cool by claiming she's someone else. When she sees Komi trying to communicate with a customer, Inaka decides to help her out by offering her a pad of paper to write down on, and it works. Afterward, Komi thanks Inaka and wishes her a happy new year, which she mutually agrees. Tadano wakes up and is greeted by his younger sister Hitomi and is surprised to see that Najimi is there as well. Najimi claims they were there because Tadano and they played games throughout the night and then changed the subject, proclaiming they needed to visit the shrine next. However, Tadano wants to eat his lunch, and Najimi attentively watches.
I'm eating lunch right now, so could you wait?
Stare.
Don't stare at me.
Later, Najimi tries to contact Komi and seemingly talks to her to have them meet at the shrine that afternoon, but in reality, it was an act. Next, Najimi contacts Ren, who can't come because she's in Hawaii, and Najimi lies, telling her that it's a shame since Komi was coming. Hearing this upsets Ren, and she immediately hangs up. Amaharu is contacted next and she's intensively focused on her phone game until Najimi ruins it by calling her. However, Najimi claims that she'll still come and meet them at the shrine later. Agari, who enjoys mochi, starts to choke on it when Najimi calls her. Yadano, playing badminton with her younger brother Katsuki, was about to get the upper hand on him when Najimi called her and broke her concentration. In her place, Katsuki answers the call for Yadano and says that he thinks she'll be able to go to the shrine with them afterward. Complaining that they're doing all of the work, Tadano takes over the phone calls and contacts One Mind's house, and her younger brother Kazuya answers. One Mind then scolds and whacks her brother and agrees to meet Tadano at the shrine later.
Idiot! How many times do I have to tell you? Don't pick up my calls!
As Najimi plays a card game with Hitomi, Tadano contacts Otori, who has been watching her fireplace since Christmas. Asking if it's okay to contact Katai, Najimi gives their seal of approval. In his household, Katai was doing push-ups under the surveillance of his sister Ai. Seeing that Tadano was calling him, Katai answered muffled and belaboredly. Continuing, Inaka didn't receive the call because she was in the country visiting her grandmother. Netsuko was on TV cheering on racers. Mono, Kiarai, and Sonoda were busy eating burgers at a restaurant. However, Najimi is confident they'll come eventually and claims they've nearly contacted everyone. Tadano then claims they should contact Komi, but gets flustered by the look Najimi and Hitomi gives him. He, however, doesn't have the gall to do it immediately, but when he does, Komi contacts Najimi and agrees to visit them at the temple. Afterward, everyone invited to the temple arrives at the entrance and follows Najimi's lead by racing into the temple area, aside from Komi and Tadano. They wish each other a happy new year and then scurry onward into the temple. There, everyone gets a fortune, and Tadano gets small luck while Komi gets great luck, but is hesitant to show it to him. An elated Katai admires his date plan to get closer to Tadano, while his sister punishes him for his goofy smile.
It's perfect. A date plan with Tadano. It's perfect.
What are you smirking about, brother?
This plan is perfect.
Katai planned to hang out with Tadano as he couldn't talk with him the previous day. He then accidentally contacts Tadano, but at first, he cannot ask Tadano to join him for some ice skating coherently. However, Tadano accepts the offer, but asks if he can invite others. Although Katai wanted only them to do it, he still agreed with the suggestion as a way to make more male friends. The following day, Tadano, accompanied by Komi, meets with Katai at the train station. As Tadano explains, he invited Najimi, but they couldn't come along as they were quadruple booked. Katai pulls himself together, believing that Komi was there to observe and support him, and smiles about the day plan he had set up. They then take the train to the ice rink, and there, Katai tries to lead.
Allow me. Follow me, friend.
Learning that both Katai and Komi have never skated before, Tadano volunteers to teach them. During their first lesson, Tadano teaches Komi how to stop after she has trouble stopping. This leads to an embarrassing moment between them, and Katai misinterprets the situation as a way to bond better with Tadano. Struggling to get balanced, Katai slips backward, but is caught by Tadano. Tadano then helps Katai skate, who gains the confidence to do it alone. Surprisingly, Katai graciously thanks Tadano in a normal tone of voice, which shocks Komi. Tadano's sister Hitomi and their mother head to the hot springs, but Tadano stays behind because he has a fever. It later turns out that he has a cold and struggles to remain calm and relaxed in bed. Wanting some Pocari water and a snack, Tadano tries to contact Najimi, but instead contacts Komi accidentally. After a brief tizzy, Tadano calls Najimi, and eventually, his doorbell rings, and when he answers it, instead of Najimi it was Komi at the door. Despite Tadano not wanting Komi to catch his cold, she lets herself in and serves him some ginger tea in bed. Komi then prepares some porridge in the kitchen and tries to feed it to him in his bed, but Tadano insists he eats it on his own. Once Tadano finishes it, he lays back down in bed while Komi cleans up the mess. She then checks on Tadano and, after tucking him in more, sees that his hand is exposed and tries to hold it, but Najimi appears and gives her a panic attack.
Hey, Komi, you're here too?
Komi is distraught with anxiety about whether or not Najimi saw her touch Tadano's hand or not. She decides to write a letter explaining the situation. However, before she can write a single thing, she has a meltdown on why she touched him in the first place. Motivated by a memory of how she believed it happened, Komi quickly jots down a letter addressed to Najimi explaining the misunderstanding. However, she shredded the letter after how shameful it sounded. The following day, Komi managed to write a letter, and before she could put it in Najimi's locker, they appeared and took the letter away from her, believing it to be a love letter. Also, Tadano greets Komi, who is so embarrassed to see him. Najimi also reads Komi's letter, which contents read that she was merely checking his pulse. At the Tadano residence, Tadano talks with his sister Hitomi about much better he feels, but is confused if Komi came over or not. Tadano has a hallucination meeting Komi in school and thanks her for it, only to get an irked reaction from her. As his sister leaves, Tadano checks his room and finds a bag of contents left by Najimi. Figuring it'd be best to ask Najimi about it, Tadano goes to school and sees them run away, crying out loud that they got a love letter. He also sees Komi nearby and greets her, and she becomes startled, and then she supposedly gives him the cold shoulder. These reactions unnerve Tadano, but he is surprised to see her ask him whether or not his cold got better. Tadano says he feels better and apologizes for yesterday. His intention in that comment was trying to deduce whether or not mistyling Komi prompted her to visit his house or not. Her response is nervous, and as they walk down the hallway, Tadano asks her what Komi did after his mistyle. Hearing this shocks her as she believes he was inquiring about her touching his hand. Flustered, Komi runs away, leaving Tadano in the lurks. Greeted by Najimi, he asks them what Komi did yesterday, and they answer she was checking his pulse. Elsewhere, Komi was in the girls' bathroom stall, wondering whether Tadano was awake or not. In the classroom, Naruse introduces himself as the handsome protagonist, but another student named Kamitani contradicts him.
I'm the dashing hero. It's only his personal opinion. Sometimes his opinion is different than the actual plot of this story.
It's also noted that he'll provide commentary on Naruse, and he does, which Tadano notices and internally questions on what the two of them are doing. Believing that Komi is the only one who could be with him, Naruse realizes that since school started, she hasn't approached him once. At first, Naruse believes that Komi has social anxiety, but ruled that out. He then decides to approach and introduce himself to her, but is cut off by the other students and is unable to approach her. Later, with Kamitani beside him, Naruse tries to deduce why everyone tried to stop him from seeing Komi, and he figures that they were his fans. He then spots Komi in the hallway, but Ren stops him and whispers a virulent diatribe into Naruse's ear. Followed by this, Naruse is stopped by each of his classmates, Amaharu, Kishi Shinobino, and Yatano. In the end, however, Naruse considers his fans jealous of him for trying to approach Komi. On his way to the restroom, he drops his handkerchief, and Komi sees this. From there, Naruse experiences a stress attack, and in the hallway, Komi returns his dropped handkerchief. Naruse interprets this act as a way of Komi confessing her love for him and, the following day, tries to exchange numbers with Komi.
What's going on? He's giving her a chance to trade phone numbers.
However, Komi doesn't understand what and merely touches his phone and walks away in a panic. Tadano, who was also there, was explained the situation by Kamitani, and then Tadano exchanged numbers with Naruse. the homeroom teacher announces that the class would be going on a field trip soon, and an exhilarated Najimi proclaims they were born for them. After school, Komi, Najimi, and Tadano talk about their upcoming trip, what's revealed to be Kyoto. Once Tadano and Naimi are finished talking about the places they're interested in visiting, Tadano asks Komi where she's interested, and she answers it's Jinkakuji. Tadano is impressed by Komi's choice, and Komi then says she must leave for a bit, which concerns him. Afterward, the trio walked home and talked about their junior high field trips. As it turns out, Komi went to Kyoto for her trip, making it her second time there. After Najimi leaves, Tadano asks if she's alright. In turn, Komi asks what he means. Tadano replies that she's acted pretty sad since that day, but Komi claims that she's fine. Glad to hear that, Tadano still offers to lend an ear whenever she needs it. When they go their separate ways, Komi calls Tadano to confess that she's lied to him about ever going to Kyoto and tells him a story about her junior high trip. Admitting that she's scared, Tadano gives words of encouragement, which moves Komi, and she thanks him for it. The following day, when the homeroom teacher arrives and asks the students to take their seats, Komi is swarmed by her female peers to join their group for the class trip.
Let's decide on groups for our field trip.
On the other hand, it's decided who will go with who will be decided by a lottery. Komi is seen off by her mother, and later meets with Tadano and Najimi at the station. The two briefly greet Komi and get on the train, and under the request of their homeroom teacher, Tadano does a head count of all of the students in their respective groups. He does this, but worries about Komi's pairing with Sasaki and Kato. To break the ice, Sasaki offers the two some Pocky, and they accept, noting how both Sasaki and her don't stand out in class. The two plan to make up for that during the field trip and allow Komi to have the best time during their trip. Finally arriving in Kyoto, the students take a bus tour, and their bus guide Ryoko Tenjoin makes a mistake or flubs in her introduction. As she continues, Najimi asks her an inappropriate question, if she has a boyfriend, and she denies the fact, so Kiarai offers to be it.
Oh, really?
Huh?
Well, then I'd like to apply for the job right now.
There it is! That's the #1 awkward thing that goofy high school students say to their tour guide!
At their first destination site, a temple, Ryoko psyches herself up and tries to grab the class attention by detailing the background of the temple garden. However, all of them are more enamored by Komi than her, which frustrates her. Not wanting to give in, Ryoko tries again at the temple and quizzes the group, but this is overshadowed by Naruse's typical self. At the next old temple they visit, Ryoko discloses the background of the place, but is caught off by the students' aloof attention. After Amaharu appears wearing a Shinsengumi outfit, Ryoko changes the subject to a bit of history on the Shinsengumi. On the other hand, Ryoko is caught off by Amaharu's and the other students' idiosyncrasies. Back on the bus, Ryoko flubs on another bit of information, the Kamo River, but doesn't care as the students aren't listening to her. This changes when Ryoko sees Komi and Tadano look outside their window, following what she said. Ryoko then recalls why she became a bus tour guide in the first place and gains the confidence to continue the tour without fail, and later sees a moment between Komi and Tadano. At their hotel, Ren, Komi, Najimi, Agari, and Amaharu share a room. They soon learn it's their turn to use the bath from their teacher, and Ren plots to touch Komi during it. Waiting for Komi to get undressed, Ren gets perturbed after waiting 5 minutes, but it felt to her like it was an hour. Nene then arrives and points out that Komi, like Agari, didn't get undressed to go into the bath because of an incident in junior high. Trying to cheer up Agari, Nene offers her a towel to prevent the same incident from then, which works. Within the bathing area, Ren laments for having her view blocked by Nene and Agari. Once Nene and Komi arrive in the bath area, they prepare themselves and get in the bath. There, Ren directly asks to touch Komi's boob, and she flatly refuses. Meanwhile, Tadano, Katai, and Naruse enter their room and see that they're paired with the class delinquents who are terrified of Katai. Unaware of the delinquents' apprehensiveness toward him, Katai greets them, but they're left in shock.
Hello there. I hope we survive through the night.
Afterward, however, they grow to respect Katai in the bath area, and Naruse bonds with him by taking photos together. Soon the delinquents join in, and Tadano takes his photo-taking task seriously.
Come! Let's create the most exquisite works of art ever with Kyoto as our backdrop!
Back in their room, the girls have a pillow fight until their teacher checks up on them, and they all feign sleep. Komi, though, couldn't sleep at all.
So is everyone asleep? That's good.
The teacher allows the students to do whatever they please for the second day, and Komi is approached by her group members Kato and Sasaki. Komi greets them, and they head off rigidly and awkwardly. Later, Kato reveals that she created an itinerary for the trip and their first destination is Utopia Street, that's outside of Kyoto. On their train ride to Utopia Street, the girls talk about what they like to do, and arriving at their destination, they enjoy many rides there. Eventually, Kato claims their next destination is getting takoyaki, despite it still being morning. After they enjoy their takoyaki, they take a train to the Tadaji Temple, where Komi feeds a deer and is revered by Kato and Sasaki for how cute she looks doing it. Barely making their train back to Kyoto, Kato and Sasaki have a bit of a scuffle about their opinions of each other, and it's broken up by Komi, who shows them pictures of their time together. Back in Kyoto, Kato reveals that she intended to visit Futamaki Movie Land, but believes they should cancel it as it's getting late in the day and it'll close soon. However, Komi suggests they start running, and with Sasaki pushing Kato forward, they all run there. Afterward, Komi dresses up like a geisha, attracting an audience of people and an improv ninja troupe, who try to capture Komi. However, Komi is rescued by Sasaki, who dons an Hanya mask and, using her yo-yo, scares away the ninjas and flees the scene. Sasaki later regroups with Komi and Kato, who play along with Sasaki's antics of trying to hide that she was the Hanya yo-yo wielding girl.
I passed by someone wearing a weird mask just now.
Oh, you did? Well, someone with this great yo-yo saved Komi just now, right?
Returning to the hotel, Kato stops playing with the facade that Sasaki wasn't the Hanya at the movie park and interrogated her over it as a game of shogi. This led to Kato detailing her dream of becoming a shogi master and how she hates the disparity between male and female players. Hoping that Sasaki would finally admit it was her, Sasaki denies the fact, causing Kato to lose her cool and try to grab Sasaki's bag to prove her point. As both Sasaki and Kato scuffle over Sasaki's bag, Komi writes that she'd like to personally thank the Hanya masked individual. Furthermore, Komi points out that the scene involving the ninjas was just an act, and hearing this, Sasaki goes to use the bathroom, where she has a meltdown about how embarrassed she is. Looking at her yo-yo, Sasaki has a flashback of a group of boys criticizing her for being a girl playing with a yo-yo. Not wanting to be bound to her past, Sasaki puts on the Hanya mask and shows her yo-yo skills to the girls. By lights out, Sasaki and Kato rope Komi into their girl talk session. Kato starts things off by asking Sasaki if she has a boyfriend, and she denies having one. Sasaki then asks Kato if she has a crush, and she sheepishly answers that it's Katai, and when they ask Komi who hers is, she asks what a crush is. Despite the two knowing it's Tadano, Kato explains what a crush is to Komi. She flusteredly reveals that it's H. On the train ride home, Komi falls asleep, and Sasaki, Kato and Kato hatch a scheme where they get Tadano alone with Komi.
Help! Komi's being attacked by a ninja!
You've got to go save her!
The plan works, and in the process, Sasaki as Kato sit next to Katai. Eventually, Komi awakens and sees Tadano sitting next to her. Disconcerted by this, Komi then shows a curious Tadano some pictures taken during the trip. Soon they're joined by Najimi, and Komi asks Tadano why he took pictures of the boys back at the hotel. Komi wants to start a conversation with someone in her class, but is too anxious to do so, as everyone in Komi's class is talking with someone. Seeing Komi's predicament, Tadano gives Komi a push of confidence, and it allows her to start a conversation with Kato, and they're soon joined by Sasaki. Afterward, Nene asks Komi if she has any plans for Valentine's Day, and after a pregnant pause, Komi answers no. Therefore, Nene invites Komi to her place to make some Valentine's gifts, and Otori tags along as well. At the One Mine residence, Komi meets Nene's three younger siblings, Kazuya, Nana, and Nono. The trio then prepares a chocolate meringue. Nene's siblings offer to help, and Nene asks Komi to help them. Komi does and bonds a bit with the kids. Once the cake bakes, Komi and Otori play with Nene's siblings. Both Kazuya and Nana both bluntly ask why Komi doesn't talk, and Nene claims that Komi is shy. They then try and get Komi to say something, but her response gets a tepid reception. Kazuya then drags Komi to the kitchen, where they watch as the cake starts to rise. Once it's finished, they all enjoy a slice of the cake until it's sadly all gone. It's Valentine's Day, and Komi wanted to leave Tadano some chocolates in his footlocker, but couldn't. Tadano then arrives and checks his footlocker for any presents, but doesn't find any. He later goes to class and briskly checks his desk for any, but doesn't find anything. On the other hand, Komi receives and gives chocolates to Najimi and Ren. She then goes around and gives chocolates to Amaharu, Yadano, Agari, Nene, Otori, Kato, and Sasaki. Soon, Katai arrives at school and hopes that Tadano has some chocolates for him.
I brought chocolates for Tadano, but it would be embarrassing if I approached him first. I wish he would approach me first instead.
You're not some young maiden.
Meanwhile, Kiarai, Sonoda, and Shinobino have fantasies about receiving chocolates from Ren, Amaharu, and Inaka. Thanks to Sasaki's aggressive nature, Kato gives some chocolates to Katai, and Komi also gives him some. After school, Katai gives Tadano some rival chocolates, but he has none in return, so he promises to provide him with some on White Day. Rechecking his foot locker for any presents, Tadano finds a rock. Thus, he returns home disconcerted and depressed that he didn't get a single piece of chocolate that day from any of his female peers. Hearing this during dinner, Tadano's younger sister Hitomi laughed at the fact that he didn't receive any chocolates from his female peers. She then spots a shady figure outside the window and coerces Tadano to buy some ice cream. As Tadano opens the door, he bumps into Komi, and the two head to the local park, where Komi gives Tadano a piece of paper from the student council meeting he missed. Once that was settled, Komi and Tadano went their separate ways until Komi decided to finally give him his chocolate, which turned out to be one that came out the best. Preparing for school, Komi has a flashback about giving her chocolates to Tadano and has a panic attack about it. However, her mother snaps her out of it, and she later goes to school. There she meets with Nene and later interacts with Najimi, Amaharu, Agari, and Yatano. In class, Komi emits a palpable pressure when she sits next to Tadano, who is confused about why and contemplates what is Komi so intense. He soon mentions Komi's chocolates that she gave him, prompting Komi to rush out of the classroom in a flustered manner. During their next class, Ren notices a tiny hole in Komi's tights and uses all of her willpower not to tear it open, but rather to inform Komi about the predicament. Later, Ren finally tells Komi about it, and as it so happens, she has the perfect size tights on her person and has Komi change into them in the restroom. When Komi was about to change into the tights that Ren had for her, Ren put on her hold tights and wore them on her head. This prompts a chase between the two, and Tadano catches a good look at Komi's legs. Onigashima Akako is formally introduced as she heads to school and runs into Tadano. Although a pleasant and cheerful girl, her temper is a significant flaw of hers. This is displayed as she heads to school, and Tadano witnesses every single one of Onigashima's temper fits. At school, Tadano witnesses Ren ignore Onigashima, who are supposed to be good friends. When Tadano asks her why, she answers that Onigashima is utterly unpredictable during her temper fits and advises that he be wary in those times. Throughout the day, Tadano witnesses Onigashima become increasingly angry until, around lunchtime, Onigashima's anger reaches a fever pitch. However, Komi manages to cool Onigashima down and helps her untie her ear pods. Tearfully, Onigashima thanks Komi and Onigashima invites her to the batting range with her. Later that day, Tadano, Ren, Najimi, Komi, and Onigashima go to the batting range, and they all have fun together. Sato is formally introduced as she cleans up her classroom, and it's noted that she's a complete pushover. This is proven during the day when people ask her for favors doing menial tasks, and she agrees to them without question. After school, Sato's fellow social and culture research club members, Hoshio and Eiko, inform Sato about her pushover tendencies. Eiko then tries to convince Sato to say no more often, but this fails, as Sato contemplates why she's considered a pushover when she does things she's asked because it makes her feel good. People ask her to help them with their tasks. Eventually, she runs into Tadano and Komi, where Tadano had to carry a large pile of papers to the staff room, and Sato insists on taking them there for him. Komi intervenes, taking half of the stack, and insists that Sato ask her for help in the future. Tadano takes another half, and the trio takes the papers to the staff room. After they do this, Sato asks Komi if she could help her when she cleans and straightens the desk in the morning, and Komi agrees to do it, as do Najimi and Tadano. This would become a daily activity for them, except for Najimi, who would sleep in. Komi sees Kato reading a book on shogi puzzles, and she joins her, and Kato also ropes in Tadano too. Despite her euphoria getting the two to try and solve a shogi puzzle that she created, it creates a tense rift between them on how to solve it. After school, Najimi points out that the two must be close in relationship to have a fight with each other.
What's going on, you two? When did you become so close to each other you started to fight?
Tadano sits in his room and reflects on the time that Komi gave him the chocolates for Valentine's Day and considered what he should get for her on White Day. He then asks his sister Hitomi what he should give to someone on White Day, and she immediately deduces that it's for the shadowy figure she spotted on Valentine's Day. Hitomi then questions Tadano if he likes or not the person who gave him the chocolate, and he tells his sister a vague answer. Therefore, Hitomi sets out to the department store to fetch her brother some chocolates to give to whomever he has his heart set on. On the day before White Day, Kiarai, Shinobino, and Sonoda all try to give Komi some chocolates, but are interrupted by Ren, who gives her a unique piece of candy. Katai also gives Kato some chocolates, which pleases her and also Sasaki. Although ridden with anxiety, Katai then gives Komi a present, a book on muscle building, hoping she likes it.
The only thing I have on my mentor is the fact that I have more muscle than her.
Tadano then tries to ask Komi out for dinner after school, but instead asks Katai, who joins him along with Naruse and Chushaku. The day after, on White Day, Tadano prepares himself to visit Komi's home to deliver her chocolates. Once there, Tadano rings the doorbell, and Shaosuke answers. Tadano introduces himself, and Komi's mom opens the door and forcefully makes Tadano enter and has him wait for Komi to return home from shopping. As he waits for Komi, he's joined by her father who brings a cup of tea with him and takes a seat by where Tadano was sitting. When Komi's father drinks the tea Tadano thought was intended for him, he breaks under the pressure, introduces himself, and then explains his relationship with Komi. At that moment, Komi appears in the room and kicks her father out, and after she does, she hastily cleans her messy room. Once that was all settled, Tadano gave Komi her present, a can of hand cream and a small piece of candy. Not wanting to take up more of Komi's time, Tadano leaves, and Komi tries the hand cream and enjoys it. At school, Tadano, Komi, Najimi, and Yadano get into an eraser war and use Tadano's desk as the battleground. Chusaku commentates on the event noting the techniques used. Immediately, Najimi, Yadano, and Tadano get disqualified because their erasers go out of bounds. With Komi as the default winner, Ren, Amaharu, and a rejuvenated Najimi partake in the second round of the game. The lively excitement coming from the war draws in a crowd and more players for the next match. Furthermore, tournament brackets are created, and Katai is roped into participating in the war and facing off against Naruse. Overwhelmed with anxiety, Katai sees Tadano watching him in the crowd, inspiring him to win against his opponent Naruse. On Komi's side, both Amaharu and Najimi cannot continue, and Komi wins by knocking the last eraser from the desk. After school, everyone except Tadano and Komi are gone, and Komi confesses that 1 year will have passed next week, and there's a chance they'll be in different classes next term. Tadano then reflects on Komi's friends that past year and how much fun they had. Noting that it's still raining outside, Najimi then arrives back and asks to share Tadano's umbrella, and the three of them walk home together.